Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to cut through the noise, bring you those key insights, and maybe spark a few aha moments along the way. Today, we're taking a really fascinating deep dive. We're exploring what it actually means to live by a love ethic. Our guide is an excerpt from a chapter called Six Values, Living by a Love Ethic. And our mission for you, our listeners, to really unpack this idea. What is a love ethic beyond just, a feeling? How could it potentially transform, well, everything, our lives, our society? And what are the surprising barriers? But also, what are the solutions? We think this will give you a new lens on connection, maybe fear, and societal change.
Yeah, and it's important to get this right from the start. The source material isn't just talking about personal feelings, not at all. It's really arguing for a radical shift in our collective values, something fundamental. There's a quote in there from Marianne Williamson that kind of sets the tone. In a truly democratic paradigm, there is no love of power for power's sake. That idea, letting go of power just for its own sake, that really underpins this whole concept.
Okay, right. So let's unpack this love ethic then. It's obviously much more than just like bromance or warm feelings, isn't it? The text says it can only happen as we let go of this obsession with power and domination. That's a strong statement.
It is, and what's really striking is how wide the application is meant to be. The source isn't just talking about, our close relationships. It's suggesting this ethic should be the bedrock for all parts of American life. Politics, religion, work, home, intimate relationships, everything. It's aiming for a huge cultural shift, not just personal improvement.
Huh. And it's built on the idea that everyone has the right to be free to live fully and well.
Yeah.
That sounds aspirational. So how does this big vision, this societal foundation, translate into just daily life? The text quotes Eric Fromm, the psychoanalyst, saying, important and radical changes are necessary if love is to become a social and not a highly individualistic, marginal phenomenon.
Exactly. It needs to move from the edges to the absolute center. And connecting that to the bigger picture, the source argues that actually living this ethic transforms lives by giving us a different set of values to operate from. It's about consciously choosing honesty, openness, personal integrity, whether it's a public decision or, a private one. It changes your whole orientation.
Okay, this is where it gets really concrete, which I like. The text gives actual examples, things like someone choosing to move to a smaller city just to be near family, or friends living together to care for aging parents, even if they could afford, say, professional care. That shows valuing loyalty, right? And sustained bonds over material advancement. It's a different definition of a good life.
Precisely. The source argues very strongly that careers, making money, sure, they're important, we need them, but they should never take precedence over valuing and nurturing human life and well-being. And here's a really interesting bit. It pushes back against the idea that being ethical is somehow boring or not fun. The text claims living ethically actually makes life joyous and more fulfilling. It nurtures spiritual growth. It uses this great analogy comparing unethical behavior to eating junk food. It tastes good for a second,
Oh, yeah.
but it leaves your soul feeling empty in a constant state of lack and longing. That quick hit doesn't sustain you.
That junk food analogy really lands. It suggests we almost build up a tolerance for that emptiness, maybe, making it harder to appreciate the real stuff.
I think that's exactly the implication. It's about long-term soul nourishment versus, that fleeting gratification.
So, okay, if this love ethic sounds so good, so fulfilling, why don't we all just do it? What's stopping us? The source points out some interesting barriers. One is that maybe information about it often only reaches people with class privilege. So access is an issue. And then there are these so-called prophets of doom, people who just insist that big problems like racism or sexism are permanent, or that the wealthy will never share. It kind of kills hope, right?
It does. And the source raises a really pointed question about those prophets. It suggests they often have the very things, security, resources that they claim are impossible for everyone else. They're living by what the text calls a capitalist-based notion of well-being, this idea that the good life can be had only by a few. It's almost like projecting their own limits onto the world.
Wow, okay. And it's not just about external barriers, is it? It's also internal. The source talks about this huge gap between the values people claim to hold and their willingness to do the work of connecting thought and action. That hypocrisy thing. It uses the example of domestic violence. People say, oh, I don't support male violence, sure. But then agreement vanishes when it means actually challenging patriarchy, questioning the whole system where men are assumed to have more rights or rule over women. That's where it gets uncomfortable.
Deeply uncomfortable. And that ties into another huge barrier, this collective fear of radical changes. The text argues lots of us are frankly, afraid to act on our beliefs because it would mean rocking the boat, challenging the conservative status quo. And this reluctance, this refusal to stand up, it weakens everyone's morality, individually and culturally. But then it makes this really sharp point. Look how we embraced revolutionary new technologies like computers. We can face radical change.
Oh, that's clever.
Yeah. It implies maybe it's just not in the interest of the conservative status quo to encourage us to confront our collective fear of love. Maybe that fear is useful to some.
That's a chilling thought, that our fear of connection, of love as a force for change, might be encouraged. So, okay, we have these fears, these barriers. How do we get past them? How do we actually do this?
Right.
The source goes back to Eric Fromm again. He says, society must be organized in such a way that man's social loving nature is not separated from his social existence, but becomes one with it.
Basically, our systems need to support our loving nature, not work against it.
And Fromm calls love the only sane and satisfactory response to the problem of human existence. The only one. That's quite something.
It is. And the text connects this to some really old wisdom, too. It brings up a passage from the first epistle of John in the Bible. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casteth out fear.
I've heard that.
Right. But the source explains that perfect here doesn't mean flawless. It means to refine. So love is like an alchemical process. As you cultivate it, as you refine it, fear just naturally leaves. It gets cast out as love grows stronger.
Ah, okay. So it's not about never feeling fear, but about love becoming stronger than the fear.
Exactly. And if love pushes out fear,
then it makes sense that cultures of domination rely on the cultivation of fear as a way to ensure obedience, keep people afraid, keep them compliant. If we're taught safety lies always with sameness, then anything different feels like a threat.
But choosing love, the source says, is choosing to connect, to find ourselves in the other. It's about bridging that difference, not fearing it.
Finding ourselves in the other, that's powerful.
Yeah. And it also brings in Cornel West's idea of a politics of conversion. He talks about tackling nihilism, that feeling of meaninglessness, and how it can be tamed by love and care. This isn't just intellectual, it's a turning of the soul, he says. And it happens through affirming your own worth, but that affirmation is fueled by the concern of others. We need each other for that.
So connection is key again.
Absolutely. And the text mentions things like Thomas More's book, Care of the Soul, as examples of literature that help people rethink values and see that interconnectedness.
Okay, so if we put this all together, embracing a love ethic means using all the parts of love, right? Care, commitment, trust, responsibility, respect, and knowledge. Bringing those into our everyday lives.
Yes, and that last one, knowledge, is vital.
The source really emphasizes that. Knowledge as an essential element of love is vital. Why? Because mass media often tells us the opposite.
Right. The media message is often that love is all mystery, maybe even that ignorance gives love its erotic and transgressive edge, like not knowing is sexier.
But this source argues that knowledge, really knowing the other person, understanding context, is essential for real love.
Which leads directly to the role of mass media, doesn't it? The source makes a pretty strong claim here. It argues that mass media tends to dwell on and perpetuate an ethic of domination and violence.
Why?
Well, the suggestion is that the people making the images, the image makers, often know more about domination and violence, maybe from lived experience or just cultural saturation, than they do about love as this transformative ethic. So they depict what they know.
Wow. And it goes on to say that if these image makers were informed by a love ethic, they'd think more critically about the images they create. They'd feel a responsibility.
Exactly. And it acknowledges some scholars debate the direct link between media images and behavior.
Right.
But it says, basically, the common sense truth remains, we are all affected by the images we consume. It just makes sense.
If all we see is violence and dehumanization presented as entertainment,
then those acts inevitably become more normalized, more acceptable in our minds.
yeah, that feels true.
And the text links this to patriarchy, too. It says many images come from a patriarchal standpoint, which assumes hierarchy is natural. In all human relations, there is an inferior and a superior party. So if you accept that worldview, scenes of domination might just seem more interesting or normal.
Okay, but here's where it gets empowering for us, for you listening. The source says we, the consumers, have power, real power. We can exercise that power all the time by not choosing to invest time, energy, or funds to support the production and dissemination of mass media images that do not reflect life-enhancing values that undermine a love ethic.
So basically voting with our attention and our wallets.
Exactly. It's not calling for censorship. The text is clear on that. It's about recognizing when media glamorizes violence, when it presents it as an okay way to control things.
And choosing not to support it, making a conscious choice.
Right. So let's widen the lens again. What happens when this love ethic moves beyond personal choice, beyond media consumption, and starts influencing, say, public policy, communities?
Well, the source quotes Carl Jung here. If the will to power is paramount, love will be lacking. It's an inverse relationship.
If power rules, love doesn't.
Pretty much. When love is genuinely the driving force, the desire to dominate just can't hold sway.
And the text makes this bold claim. All the great social movements for freedom and justice in our society have promoted a love ethic. Thinking about, like, the civil rights movement.
Exactly. And it even speculates, hypothetically, if all public policy was actually created in the spirit of love, think about the problems that might just disappear. Unemployment, homelessness, failing schools, addiction. It suggests these are symptoms of policies lacking that love ethic foundation.
That's a huge what if. Does it give any real-world examples of trying this?
It does. It mentions a book by Melody Chavis, Altars in the Street. It tells the story of a community where people, different races, different classes, actually came together. They were trying to create peace and love in their environment, really build that ethic on the ground.
And did it work?
Well, their efforts were making a difference, but ultimately, they were undermined by the failure of support from public policy and city government. The system wasn't aligned with their efforts.
So individual or community effort isn't always enough if the larger structures aren't supportive.
That seems to be the point. Another example comes from the poet Wendell Berry, writing about rural Kentucky. He describes communities that embrace an ethic of communalism and the sharing of resources. People who just do not believe that they can survive and flourish by the rule of dog eat dog.
They reject that competitive model.
Yeah, and they doubt that good solutions can be produced by violence. It's a different way of being together.
And the author of our source material even shares their own experiences. Living in small towns, a co-op building in New York, seeing principles like neighborliness of fellowship, care, and respect in action, proving that this ethic can be lived day to day in collective settings. It's not just a theory.
It's possible. It exists.
So wrapping this all up, what's the main takeaway from this whole deep dive? It really feels like the core message is that choosing to live by this love ethic, prioritizing care, commitment, trust, respect, knowledge, integrity, cooperation.
All those dimensions.
It takes courage, real courage. It means learning how to face our fears.
And accepting that fear might still be there sometime.
Right. It doesn't vanish, maybe, but it doesn't have to stop us. It doesn't have to be in charge.
And the source ends with this really hopeful, I think, powerful thought. It suggests that for those who do embrace this love ethic, who choose to live this way, when we let our light shine, we draw to us and are drawn to other bearers of light. We are not alone.
Finding connection through living these values.
Exactly. You find your people or they find you.
Which leaves us and you with a big question to think about, doesn't it? In what ways, maybe small ways, maybe big ones, could embracing these values, putting connection over domination, loyalty over just getting ahead, knowledge over that manufactured mystery, how could that radically change some part of your daily life? Or maybe even start to ripple out and change your community? Something to definitely ponder.